Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 11th, 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 399, where we learn to be a better gamer. Amazingly enough, I successfully paid rent for January, only half a month late. Yes! So, with that in mind, we shall celebrate the fact that I left my door open. Let me go shut that. Oh, water. Oh, roommates, those jerks, coming in with their groceries. And let's talk a little bit about the topic of today's daily. It is going to be a very easy to execute, straightforward, standard TvP build, a Terran versus Protoss build from Empire.Kas. Yes. And let me just note, if any of you are having trouble in the matchup, I know it's fun to do all the crazy creative strategies and feel clever, but there comes a point where you don't really want to be clever anymore, you just want to win. And I will steer you clear from trying to do something like a 4x in the middle of the map all in, and I will direct you towards this one. Because it's easy in an entirely different way. In those all-ins, it's a quick 6 minutes. In this, it's a little bit longer, but it's much more guaranteed. And easy to pull off, too. Fantastic. First, let me go through some announcements. Fun Day Monday for the week. You must hop onto a 1 versus 1 game and request that your opponent gives you 2 units that you may not build for the whole game. The only restriction is that those 2 units may not begin with the same letters. So for instance, he cannot choose Marines and Marauders for you not to build. He can choose Marines and Tanks, because Marine and Tank begin with different letters. But Marines and Marauders both begin with the letter M. So we can't do that. Simple as that. Submit those to Monday at day9.tv. For Newbie Tuesday, if you could send me an epic pro game that's a very, very long game, that would be great, because we're going to look at the end game for Newbie Tuesday next week. The end game, what happens from like the 20-minute mark on when both players are maxed. All that sort of good stuff. I'm going to be reviewing that for Newbie Tuesday. And the last thing, but not the least thing, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'll be on an airplane. That's it. Cool. Let's hump into the topic. No, let's hop into the topic of today. We're going to be examining this Terran vs. Protoss build by Empire.Kas. One thing to note about some of the earlier dailies that I did, like 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago, I pretty much did not cover really standard-looking Terran versus Protoss. There was even a period before players were experimenting much with ghosts, where the matchup was literally Marine, Marauder, Medevac, Viking, period. That was it. That's all players did. It was really dry, right? So the reason I didn't, it wasn't just that the composition was coming up again and again and again. It was that they were doing the exact same builds in the exact same way and expanding at the same times, and it was just, it bored me. It really, really bored me from the Terran point of view. It was all expand, 3 racks, start to tech towards the starport, get the 2 add-ons and the reactor. Always the drop harass would follow. You saw Select do this very often at MLGs. And then slowly adding on a 3rd command center, and then more barracks, blah, blah, blah. But, man, there was no variation. Fortunately, there's been a lot more variation over time, with Team Slayers doing a very interesting fast upgrade variant of the Marine Marauder Medevac. Far less drops, far more attacking the front door. Thorzane also been doing a very similar style. We've also been seeing Ghosts crop up quite a bit more. We've seen players doing very wild openings, and I'm going to completely ignore the 1-1-1, because that is not a Marine Marauder Medevac build. However, something that I said at the start of the daily, I want to say again. It can be so tempting to play around in all these clever, creative builds that are all tricky and require Q control, but as fun as those builds are, if you're losing a lot, it can be frustrating to just bang your head against the wall. And I don't want you to cheese, I want you to go standard. We love standard. This is a very straightforward build that we're going to be talking our way through, but in particular, we're going to note how this is looking like just basic Marine Marauder Medevac, but Empire.Kas is going to do a little variant that makes it all about dat macro. Fantastico. Now, as I was saying, last time I tried to do this daily, for any of you archive viewers, my encoder actually crashed, and I was talking to only myself for a little bit of time. But it's totally cool because I get to reuse the same comments. Ha! European players doing all that talking, being very positive, doing what I call the White Raw happy face. This happy face reminds me so much of White Raw. Aww. I love their enthusiasm. You'll note that the map is, of course, Tal'Darim Altar. Mana is green on the mini-map, which makes them very hard to see, but that's okay, because we're only watching from Empire.Kas' point of view. Let's talk ultra briefly about the map. Wide open here, huge distances. Huge distances mean, well, actually, let me go through that into two halves. Wide open space here, wide open space here. Generally, it's easier to defend this area because of the ramp than it is to defend this area. As a result, a lot of players want to just build a bunker here or send their Marines here when they're doing any build. And as a result, you might just think, well, why not early expand? This is compounded by the fact that it's a huge map, so you may as well early expand because you can get away with it. Cool. A lot of 2-racks openings are not so effective on this map because they rely on being able to put pressure on your opponent early. This is not one of them. Early Hellion builds quite good on this map because of this huge space that it's hard for the protoss to defend. Already, I want you to note that our Terran buddy Empire.Kas is not scouting very early. He's scouting after this barracks was finished. I was actually talking to Naniwa about a week ago about his Protoss versus Protoss play, and he states that he's pretty much never scouts early at all. In fact, the only thing he really needs to know is where his opponent is located, because he is not trying to rely on the tells from inside the base. He's not trying to look at their buildings or their gas timing or any of that. He's looking at how many sentries they build at the front. Cool. Why is that an interesting comment? Because he doesn't scout because his build relies none on that information. I love how many pro players do late scouts, because here Empire.Kas is not actually trying to get in there and to count how many gateways and to see how much gas there is. All he really needs to know is the position of his opponent in a reasonable amount of time. Think about that with a lot of your builds. Do you really change your build when you find him? Or do you pretty much continue along the same path? If you're continuing along the same path, you may very well want to cut that out, scout later. Also, love that Empire.Kas built this supply depot and then built this command center. Love that! Because if you build the supply depot first, you can do constant Marine and SCV production. I like that. It's a little simpler. It's a little bit safer against those proxies in the middle of the map. Generally unlikely to happen, but I don't think that this map is so scary that you need to build your command center first, by any measure. Now, ordinarily, we would see barracks get built, and then gas get built. But here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes! Oh! And
our SCVs.
Bam! Excellent. Building a command center already. This is what's going to make this build very interesting, is this third command center action. Before I discuss that any further, I want to note the scouting SCV we talked about before. It gets the following information. It knows that a cybernetics core was built. Cool, that means our opponent isn't going to go mass zealot for the whole game. Okay, so basically it's no information, right? It means nothing. There's nothing particularly valuable gained. This is what I love so much about Empire.Kas' build order that we're going to see. It just doesn't rely that much on knowing where your opponent is. Or excuse me, it doesn't rely that much on knowing exactly what your opponent is doing early on. So here we go. There's the command center going down. Has not built a bunker yet. Part of the reason he's building no bunker is because he's staying by this ramp. You might ask, well, what if he swings all the way around like this? In practice, that's such a long amount of time that a delayed bunker will even finish with plenty of time left. So we now have 3 command centers going down. In your head, with any, I guess I'd say in any game of StarCraft ever, there's a couple of core things that you want to get. Let's take Terran vs. Protoss that we're watching. Let's list off some of those real basic things that we want to get. Bunch of add-ons and stim. Lot of upgrades. Medevacs. Cool. For Protoss versus Terran, you might say something like Colossus with range, double forge upgrades, a third base. Doesn't have to be in lists of 3. I generally like to keep them small. But whenever you have something simple like add-ons with stim and combat shield, medevacs, upgrades for my Marine Marauder, when you have these lists, the big question you should always ask yourself when you do some reordering like this is, how should I reorder those things? Should I be getting the upgrades first? And then getting the add-ons, and then getting medevacs? Should I be getting the medevacs really, really quickly, and then the add-ons, and then the upgrades? With a build like this, since we are going macro first, I lean heavily away from factory first. I think that factory first would be a clear blunder. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. I actually realized that we should probably discuss the number of barracks Empire.Kas makes. It's going to be a pretty standard 3 barracks. And I want you to pretend that this command center isn't here. 1 command center with 3 barracks. 1 command center with a bunker. It looks exactly like other early expand builds. Absolutely exactly like that. And then he follows it up with 1 gas, and soon enough, 2 gas. I think he actually builds it up here, I want to say. I should be building this one, I guess, momentarily. Did I miscount? Wow. Totally miscounted. Wow. Or I counted correctly and just wrote incorrectly with my notes. No big deal. So, that's actually a really surprising thing, and a really important thing that I should not have missed. The fact that this geyser did not go down. This apparently takes a little bit more minerals than I would have thought. So when you're taking 1 refinery, obviously I think the only thing you can comfortably do is get an add-on. That seems quite reasonable. I'd also like to note that since we have no ability to put early pressure on our opponent, we 100% of the time have to build at least 1 extra bunker. We absolutely must. There's the second gas geyser. A little bit late. So if I had to describe the build, it would be as simple as barracks, command center, bunker, barracks, refinery, and then a delayed second refinery.
Upgrade.
Popping out of the barracks, we're just going to have a lot of Marines and Marauders. One of the first upgrades that we are going to be getting here will be that stim upgrade. And this makes perfect sense in my eyes. We're delaying everything by getting this 3rd command center. I kind of want stim and combat shield in case he starts to try to do some sort of attack at me early on. The next thing that I would personally focus on would be building an engineering bay. Empire.Kas doesn't do that. I don't think it's that... I think it's pretty close. One or the other is probably going to be fine, but I think that, again, going for the factory straight away is a really bad idea. The one thing that's somewhat unique about the way that Empire.Kas is playing is that generally we get these 2 refineries pretty quickly, and then we soon enough get a 3rd refinery. But Empire.Kas is suddenly sweeping up to 4 refineries quite quickly. I'll back up just a second. And let's just see when the geysers go down. First geyser went down right after we had enough money with the 3 barracks. This geyser went down right after our last barracks finished.
Upgrade.
Let's look at when this geyser ends up popping down. This geyser pops down, well, it looks like right when stim is getting started. I prefer to link things together as opposed to relying on food. This is just a personal preference of mine.
Armed and ready.
So, bam, right around the time stim gets started, that's when this refinery is started. And I suppose you could say at 55 to 60 food, he starts refinery number 4. But not really my style. I prefer this kind of link up, but I guess that's as good enough signal as any. A little bit before 60 food, we want all 4 refineries chug-a-luggin'. Excelente. EmpireKas is going to go ahead and go straight for this factory right after that. And you're noticing that things are pretty expected at this point. Non-stop SCV production, building the depots up here, making sure he has 2 bunkers already done, getting the add-ons after that. He's actually completing all his add-ons and getting his upgrades started before he builds an engineering bay down here. But again, in this matchup, I personally am almost always a fan of favoring the upgrades, but that's one thing that I like about this build. It's less reliant on super early upgrade timings, and more just, I'm going to have way more stuff than you because I got my early orbital. Now, if we look at this unit counting station, it is remarkable that we're ahead of our opponent in terms of workers. Mana, if you watch this game, has been spending a good amount of chrono boosts on his nexuses, or nexi, or what have you. And per usual, the reactor tech lab mixture.
Add-on complete.
There's the combat shield. Now we're making marauders and marines 2 at a time. We get the starport up. Nifty. And again, pretend this command center doesn't exist. 3 barracks, 2 tech labs and a reactor, an engineering bay. We're getting factory and starport. It is as standard can be. One thing that I would note, though, we will get hit by Dark Templar well before this. Around 7 minutes and 30 seconds is when a Dark Templar rush finishes. So that's one thing that I would be aware of with this build. But why is that suddenly not a big concern? Why is that not as big a concern? Well, we have 1, 2, 3 orbital commands. It makes it so much easier to deal with DT play. So much easier. I know that with many people in the chat, well, because I see it, people are saying, wow, look at that, EmpireKas is already so far ahead of Mana. This is a little bit of an optical illusion, because Mana is correctly reading that his opponent is going to be passive. He's seen that there's just not that much stuff coming out the front. So what Mana is spending a lot of his energy on is getting these upgrades up quickly. He's building a lot of infrastructure. Already has 6 gateways down. I believe he... Yeah, there it is. There's the robotics bay already done. Mana is spending a ton on just basic gateway stuffs. Or excuse me, basic production stuffs. He's just going straight for the tech path. And he's even getting ready to clear out these destructible rocks. This is very normal for Mana to be behind on food, given what he's doing right now. The reason I bring all that up, just ignore these numbers, please. Please, I beg of you. Now, we're suddenly going to see some big, just general playstyle differences. The way that a Terran player would ordinarily proceed if he went for very fast medevacs and did not get an orbital command is it would be drop time. Aw, yeah. It would be time to begin moving out, doing a little bit of harassment here, maybe trying to do some drops in the back, freak them out, do some damage there. EmpireKas is going to take much more of a big walk the army forward approach.
Research complete.
Once this 3rd command center is starting to lift out, right around 10 minutants, just add on barracks 4 and 5. And in my eyes, if you are ever doing something that involves late game play, such as taking an early 3rd, make sure that you get a lot of upgrades going. And this is exactly what we see EmpireKas do. Look at the timing. Look at that great commentary timing right before he built the engineering bays. It's almost as though I watched this game like 5 times before doing the daily. But yeah, the double engineering bays very early, I think, is of utmost importance. You can't do harass as effectively because your medevacs are late. But the upgrades make perfect sense. We're going into this huge macro mode. Excellent. And right now, we've pretty much seen the basics of the opening. 61 to 54. Again, remarkable that we are that far ahead in the worker count. Before we step into part 2, I want to recap all the fundamental ideas. First of all, ultra early 3rd command center. 3 barracks and getting 4 geysers pretty damn quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. We don't build them all at once, but we stagger them. but again, quite quick. Still going straight for the medevacs. Really heavy emphasis on upgrades. So let's see if I can do that in 4 words. CC, 4 gas, typical medevac timing, fast upgrades. I got not fast upgrades, mass upgrades. There we go. Whew. Now, we're going to step into part 2 in just a moment and look at the way Empire.Kas is going to control the mid-game. We're going to talk a lot about the mid-game and all that good jazz. So we'll be back in 2 to 3 minutes for part number 2 of Empire.Kas' TvP. Or if you're watching on the archives, we'll be going on to part 2 right now.